It was 6:17 a.m. when I heard the knock, three sharp bangs, not polite, not neighborly, the kind of knock that says, "We're here for something and we're not asking." I looked out the kitchen window, two men, black vests, tactical pants. One had sunglasses on before the sun was even up. The other stood like he was waiting for permission to bust down my door, and then I saw the patch. Not a sheriff's badge, not police. It read, HOA Compliance Enforcement Tactical Division. I almost laughed. Until I noticed the third man, standing by their truck with a clipboard in one hand and what looked like a holstered weapon on the other. My stomach dropped. These weren't real officers, and they weren't here for a fine. They were here to take something. And they had no idea who was asleep in the next room. Before we dive deeper, drop your city in the comments if you've ever dealt with an HOA that acts like a private military. I'm calling this one out for every homeowner who's ever been pushed, fined, or threatened off their own land. Let me take you back, because this didn't start with a knock. It started with a fence. My husband and I bought this land 7 years ago, just under 5 acres, quiet, outside the city lines but close enough to grocery runs and hospital access. We built a modest ranch-style home with solar panels, a barn, and a small goat pen for weekend fun. We didn't want a McMansion. We wanted space, freedom, room to breathe. There was no active HOA when we bought the property. The last one dissolved years ago. No dues, no meetings, nothing in the title. Just a few properties that shared a private gravel road and helped each other maintain it. And for 6 years, it was perfect, until Karen moved in. Karen wasn't her real name, but that's what everyone called her. Mid-50s, high-strung, freshly divorced, drove a white SUV with a vanity plate that said Rule as One. She moved into the lot across the road, and almost immediately, things started changing. At first it was subtle, a flyer in the mailbox about neighborhood standards. Then a typed letter suggesting we all formalize community guidelines. Then a sign staked into the ground at the gravel road entrance that read, Oak Hill HOA compliance begins at the gate. Everyone thought it was a joke, until the fine started. The first violation came taped to our gate. Unauthorized fencing materials correct by Friday or be fined $75. I stared at it, stunned. Our fence. It had been there for 6 years. Pressure-treated, clean, maintained, well within county regulations. I crumpled the notice and tossed it. The next week, a second one showed up. Unauthorized livestock goats are prohibited per Section 3A of Oak Hill HOA policy. Section 3A of what? There was no HOA. I asked around. Karen had filed paperwork, her own paperwork, to re-establish the defunct HOA. She listed herself as president. And 2 neighbors, both of whom didn't even live on the road as board members. It wasn't legal, but it looked official, and she was using it to bully anyone who didn't fit her version of order. We ignored her at first, but Karen escalated. She started leaving voicemail messages. One day it was, just a friendly heads up, your barn color might violate community guidelines soon. Another day, we're reviewing property lines for compliance. You might want to check your back fence. And then we got a notice in the mail, certified. It read, your land has been flagged for encroachment onto common HOA property. A site visit is scheduled for assessment. If confirmed, corrective transfer of property will be initiated. Corrective transfer, in plain English, she was trying to steal our land. I wanted to go straight to the sheriff, but my husband, he stayed calm, cool, his exact words. Let her keep pushing. Just make sure the cameras are charged. And I did. We added 2 more solar cams on the back property line and 1 inside the barn. Because he knew something I didn't yet. Karen wasn't just annoying, she was calculating. And this wasn't about property, it was about control. 2 days later, Karen made her next move. She showed up at our gate with a man in a black uniform, full tactical gear, earpiece, dark sunglasses, the whole show. She said, "This is Officer Monroe with HOA enforcement. We're here to walk the boundary line and confirm encroachment." I opened the gate just enough to speak. There's no active HOA, and that's not an officer. Monroe didn't even introduce himself. He just held up a fake-looking badge and said, "We have authority under the Oak Hill Charter. You're required to comply." My husband came out of the barn then, gloves on, calm as ever. He didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger, just looked Monroe dead in the eye and said, "You've got about 5 seconds to step off my land before this becomes your worst decision today." Monroe paused. Karen blurted something about calling it in. But then she saw what was in my husband's hand, a Navy SEAL challenge coin. He didn't flash it like a badge. He just flipped it once in the air, caught it, and stared. Monroe stepped back. Karen muttered something and turned away. They left, but it wasn't over. That night my husband sat me down. "I've seen people like this overseas," he said. "They don't stop with warnings, they escalate, they provoke, and then they make their move when you're least expecting it." "So what do we do?" I asked. His reply, "We let her try." And that leads us back to the knock. 6:17 a.m., 3 fake HOA cops standing on my porch, one resting his hand on what looked like a sidearm. They didn't ask for permission. They said, "We're here to secure the property. This lot has been reassigned." My husband walked out a second later. Not fast, not loud, just deliberate, and the way those men shifted when they saw him. It was like they'd just realized they kicked the wrong door. But that was only the beginning, because my husband didn't call the sheriff, not yet. He had a better plan, and by the time he was done, Karen would wish she'd never printed that first flyer. My husband didn't flinch. 3 men on our porch, matching black polos, tactical pants, sunglasses before sunrise. One had a clipboard, one had a radio, one had his hand too close to a weapon, and not a single one of them had a real badge. "Step aside," the tall one said. "This land's been flagged for reassignment." My husband stepped forward 1 step, no words, and somehow that was louder than anything he could have said, because all 3 of them shifted. They didn't know who he was yet, but they knew enough to feel it. He didn't bluff, he didn't blink. He just tilted his head like he was evaluating a threat he'd seen 100 times before. The tall one tried to recover. "We're with Oak Hill HOA Tactical. We're authorized to enter this lot under emergency compliance protocol." My husband raised an eyebrow. "You just made that up. Sir, we're going to need you to stand down." Then the one on the right, the jumpy one, reached toward his side holster, and that's when my husband moved, not violently, not aggressively, just fast. He stepped between me and the 3 men, his voice low and surgical. "Put your hand back where I can see it. That's not a request." They hesitated, and in that moment of silence my husband delivered a line I'll never forget. "You boys ever been trained to clear a room before? Because I have. And you're standing like someone who read about it in a blog post." The man on the right froze. Tall one cleared his throat and said, We'll return with paperwork." My husband nodded once. "Yeah, you do that." They backed off, didn't turn around. Just walked backward to the gravel road where their truck waited. As soon as they pulled away, he turned to me and said, "They're not done. But now I know their rhythm." We went inside. He poured coffee like nothing had happened, but I could tell he'd shifted. He was scanning windows, marking timings, watching shadows, not panicking, preparing. That's what they trained him to do. A SEAL doesn't get loud, he gets ready. 30 minutes later, Karen sent a group text, not to us directly but to nearly everyone on the gravel road. It read, "Important update. Several properties will be reviewed for non-compliance today. Enforcement personnel are active. Please cooperate fully for your own safety." The boldness was next level, but we weren't surprised. Karen didn't believe in boundaries. She believed in control. And when a petty tyrant finds out you won't bow, they double down. At noon, my husband called in a favor. One of his old teammates, now working private security, looped us in on some local patterns. Turns out, enforcement-style intimidation by fake HOA patrols wasn't new. It was a growing scam tactic in rural counties, especially where old HOAs had dissolved. And the people behind it, they bet on fear. They bet on no one pushing back. That was their mistake. My husband walked the perimeter that afternoon, phone in hand, taking photos of every property marker, every corner stake, every utility box. He annotated everything, not for social media, not for drama, for evidence. Meanwhile, I went digital. I started building a timeline of every violation, flyer, enforcement notice, and conversation we'd had with Karen since she moved in. We weren't just fighting for our land. We were building a case. That night, another knock, not at the door, at the barn. My husband was inside. I watched through the kitchen window. A flashlight beam swept across the goat pen, then landed on our barn wall. Then the door creaked open, but only one man stepped inside. Tall guy, same as this morning, except this time he was alone. Bad move. What happened next lasted maybe 20 seconds. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shift. One moment the man was holding his flashlight like a weapon. The next, he was against the wall face first, arms pinned behind him with one of my husband's boots planted firmly on the ground beside him. No bruises, no blood, just control. My husband leaned in, said something close to the man's ear, then let him go. The man stumbled out like he'd seen something he wasn't ready for. I opened the front door as he passed. "You're trespassing," I said. He didn't even look at me, just muttered, "I'm done," and kept walking. 10 minutes later, Karen showed up in person. At the gate, she didn't step in. She just stood there with her clipboard like she owned the whole damn county. "I heard there was an incident," she said, trying to keep her voice composed. "There was," I replied. "And you should know your enforcement officer just broke into a structure. We have it on video." Her lips twitched. "Are you threatening me?" "No, Karen, I'm informing you." She took a breath. "You've made this harder than it needed to be. You sent armed men to our door," I said. "You don't get to play victim now." She turned to leave but paused. "I'm not finished," she muttered. From behind me, my husband said, "Yeah, you are." She looked up, and that's when she saw it. He wasn't holding a weapon, he wasn't in uniform, he just stood there, arms crossed, eyes locked. But something in his stance made her step back. "I'll be filing charges," she snapped. "You should," he said. "You're going to need a paper trail for when the state reviews your scam." She didn't answer, just got into her car and drove off too fast for a gravel road. Inside, I looked at him. "You really think she's done?" He shook his head. "No. But we just took away her leverage." The next morning, something changed. We found a flyer taped to our gate. It didn't threaten a fine. It didn't cite fake policies. It just had one sentence typed in all caps. "We don't want trouble, but we'll get IT if we have to." No name. No signature. No contact. But we knew who sent it. Karen wasn't just escalating. She was getting sloppy. Sloppy means desperate. Desperate means dangerous. That night, my husband pulled an old metal case from the back of the closet. He didn't say anything as he opened it. Inside was a collection of items he hadn't touched in years. Wrist-mounted GPS, tactical flashlight, folded maps, and a neatly sealed envelope marked, "Upward Last Resort." He didn't open that envelope. He just looked at me and said, "We've tried the right way. The next time she sends someone to our door, we finish this." And the next time came sooner than we thought, but this time, we weren't waiting behind the door. We were already outside, and Karen's fake patrol, they weren't ready for what was coming. Well, before we continue, if you're enjoying this story and love such dramas, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber keeps me motivated to dig deeper, uncover more wild stories, and bring you even crazier content. Your support means everything. It's what keeps this channel going strong. And trust me, there's plenty more chaos coming your way. Back to the story. The sun hadn't fully risen when we heard the sound again. This time it wasn't a knock, it was boots on gravel, multiple pairs. I peeked through the side curtain and saw them, 3 figures. 2 of the same guys from before, plus a new one. They wore matching black polos with the words HOA Tactical Oversight printed on the back in white vinyl letters, all of it fake, but the way they moved, it was different this time. More careful, they were learning, but they were too late, because this time we weren't reacting, we were waiting. My husband was already outside, standing just past the barn, hands on his hips like he was taking inventory of the morning air. The men spotted him and froze. The tall one, clipboard in hand, tried to project authority. "We need access to the southern boundary line for HOA reevaluation." My husband cut him off with a single raised hand. "Stop talking. You're done pretending." They shifted uncomfortably. The new guy, big shoulders, shaved head, glanced back toward their vehicle like maybe he'd left the engine running. My husband walked up slowly, controlled. His posture was loose, relaxed, but his eyes laser-locked. "I want names. Now." The tall one laughed, trying to shake it off. "We don't have to answer to. You're trespassing," my husband interrupted. "You're impersonating law enforcement, and you're seconds away from being on the phone with someone who can pull your entire fake operation apart." Then he leaned in slightly and said, "Or you can walk back to your truck, disappear, and pray Karen never texts you again." The guy looked like he wanted to push back, but then my husband said 4 simple words, "We know your names," and they folded, they left, again. But this time, they didn't drive back to Karen's house. They scattered. That was the moment I realized something had shifted. They weren't just fake tough guys anymore. They were contractors, Amateurs, probably paid under the table, roped into playing cop for a woman who thought power was something you could rent by the hour. And my husband, he'd already tracked them. He had their license plates, photos, even partial phone numbers pulled from the text thread Karen had accidentally exposed when she mass messaged the neighborhood. She wasn't just building a fake HOA. She was building a private militia of puppets, and now we had proof. That same day, we sent everything to the county sheriff's office, not just complaints, evidence, fake badges, videos of illegal enforcement visits, license plate photos, the flyer that read, "We don't want trouble." We even submitted drone footage from the previous week, showing Karen walking the southern boundary line with a man holding a surveying pole, trying to remap our property line without permission. My husband annotated every clip with timestamps and geo-coordinates. The sheriff's office didn't respond right away, but we weren't done. Next came the land records. We pulled title history, plotted official boundaries, and highlighted every illegal move Karen had made. She'd filed an HOA amendment, entirely fake, claiming our rear acre had historically been shared green space, but we had purchased contracts and legal plats that proved otherwise. We brought it to the county recorder's office, filed a formal dispute, and froze any attempt to alter the parcel record, which meant Karen's next step, whatever it was, would be flagged immediately. She was boxed in legally, but she didn't know it yet. That night, Karen made her next mistake. She sent out a flyer with the headline, "Defensive homeowners are under review, enforcement action may escalate." It was taped to every mailbox on the gravel road, including ours. My husband didn't even read the whole thing. He just snapped a photo and said, "She just stepped over the line." "What do we do?" I asked. His answer, "We let the neighbors see everything." The next morning we hosted coffee, nothing formal, no speech, just a folding table, 2 thermoses, and a sign that said, "Ask us what Karen's really doing." At first, only Naomi showed up, the mom with 3 kids who'd been hit with a fake fine over sidewalk chalk. Then came Bill, the retired deputy with a bum leg. Then 4 more. Within the hour, we had 12 people sipping coffee on our driveway as my husband walked them through screenshots, aerial footage, and official land records. You could see it in their faces: shock, rage, relief that someone had been documenting it all. Karen had preyed on silence. But now, that silence was broken. A man named Eduardo spoke up. We didn't know him well, but he owned one of the Edge properties. "She came to my house last week," he said, "told me the corner of my fence was on shared utility land, gave me a compliance deadline. I thought it was real." He showed us the flyer, same format, same fake logo, same threat. We added it to the pile. Naomi pulled out her phone. "This is what she sent me last month. Told me my porch lights violated HOA brightness code." There was no such code, but Karen had made it look real. And worse, people had paid. We gathered 6 separate fake fines totaling over $1,700. Each had been paid by Zelle or Venmo to an account labeled OS Oak Hill Compliance Enforcement. But that account was linked to Karen's name. By the time we closed the laptop, no one was holding coffee anymore. They were holding evidence packets, and Karen, she was watching from her porch across the road. We saw her, saw the way her fingers tightened around her phone. She wasn't scared, not yet, but she was rattled. And that was all we needed, because the next move wouldn't come from us. It came from a neighbor we barely knew, a quiet man named Simon who taught high school history and rarely left his house except for grocery runs. He texted my husband at 7:43 p.m. "Karen just knocked on my door. Tried to get me to sign something about removing instigators. Sounded like she's panicking. Told her to leave. Got the convo on ring cam." We asked if he could send it. He did. And what we saw was Karen begging, not enforcing, begging for people to support her fake HOA structure. She said, "If we don't push them out, we lose the neighborhood." She meant us, but the way she said it, she sounded cornered, and we knew exactly what that meant. She'd try one last move, something bold, something reckless, and my husband, he was already setting the trap. It happened just after noon on a Thursday. The air was hot still. No wind. No birds. The kind of silence that feels planned. I was in the kitchen when I saw the first truck pull up, matte black, no markings, oversized tires. Then another, 2 trucks, 6 men, all dressed in black polos with matching patches that read, OHCE. Oak Hill Compliance Enforcement. They were the same ones from before, plus more. A full group this time, and behind them, Karen, driving her white SUV like she was arriving at a real estate closing instead of trespassing on someone's land. She stepped out with a clipboard and a highlighter tucked into her ponytail like she was about to conduct a property seizure. Only this time, they didn't knock. They went straight to the fence line. My husband was already in the field. He'd spent the morning preparing. Not just checking the cameras or locking the barn. He'd staged it like he was back on a training op. 2 trail cams facing the rear fence, 1 drone prepped on standby, and his GoPro, mounted high on the utility pole, perfectly angled toward the back acre. Karen thought today was her big move, but she was walking straight into a data ambush. I ran outside as the first 2 men started measuring the rear fence. "What do you think you're doing?" I shouted. Karen turned, smiling. "We've issued multiple notices regarding boundary violations. This property has been found in breach of Oak Hill HOA regulations. We're conducting a lot reassignment." "Lot reassignment," I laughed. "That's not a thing, Karen." She motioned to the men with a wave of her clipboard. "We have documentation. That's not a real enforcement group." She kept smiling. "Well, unless you're going to call the police, I suggest you stand back." That's when my husband appeared, not from the house, from the trees. He emerged from the back tree line behind the property, calm, quiet, and camera in hand. "Already did," he said. "They're on their way, and they're not coming for us." Karen's smile faltered. The man closest to the fence looked toward the road. The second stepped back. "We have authority under Section 2B of the Oak Hill Charter," Karen snapped. My husband raised an eyebrow. "Funny. That charter was nullified in 2014. County recorder stamped the termination himself." He pulled a document from his back pocket and tossed it to the nearest guy. It was laminated, highlighted, official, and real. "This is the dissolution record, filed and stamped." Karen glanced at it, trying not to look concerned. But the shift was happening. Her guys were sweating. They came expecting soft targets. What they got was surveillance footage, printed documents, and a man who'd built precision raids in Afghanistan, now running point on his own soil. And then it got worse for her. My husband looked up, tapped his watch, and said, "Drones live. Audio hot. Any of you still want to play cop?" At that moment, a buzzing sound rose over the trees. Our drone. My husband had precincted to hover scan and record every license plate, face, and vehicle within a 100-yard radius. Karen finally broke character. "Are you trying to intimidate us?" He stepped forward. "No, Karen, I'm protecting my land." Then he turned to the men. "And unless one of you wants to go down for impersonating law enforcement and attempted land theft, I suggest you start walking." They hesitated. But just then, a sheriff's vehicle appeared at the edge of the road, 1 cruiser, then 2. Karen's mouth opened slightly, like maybe she had something rehearsed, but nothing came out. The deputies stepped out, hands calm, posture neutral. They didn't draw weapons, they didn't shout, they just walked. The lead deputy nodded toward my husband. "Got the call," he nodded back. "All documented. You'll want to start with the woman in the white SUV." Karen's voice finally broke through. "This is a private community matter," she said. The deputy didn't even turn toward her. "Just said, ma'am, we're going to need to see identification and any legal documentation that authorizes you to enforce land action on this property." She froze. Her clipboard was shaking now. The men beside her were already retreating, slowly walking backward toward the trucks. The second deputy moved to intercept them. "Hang tight," he said. "We've got questions." Karen tried to pivot. "This land was part of a shared-use clause. I have witnesses." My husband cut in, voice like a scalpel. "No, Karen, you have a clipboard and a fantasy." The deputy gestured for her license. When she hesitated, he added, "If you don't hand it over voluntarily, we'll treat this as obstruction." She finally handed it to him, silently. My husband handed him a flash drive. "Footage, drones, trail cams, time logs, all yours." The deputy took it without a word. Karen watched it happen like she was watching her empire burn, because she was. One by one, the deputies questioned her tactical team. And one by one, they folded. One of them admitted he'd been hired through a Craigslist ad. Another confessed they were paid in cash and told it was just neighborhood compliance enforcement. One guy admitted he thought it was a security job and had no idea it involved claiming land. By the time they finished, the deputies had enough to write 6 incident reports and seize Karen's clipboard as evidence. She tried one last time to salvage control. "You don't understand what they've been doing," she said, pointing at us, but no one listened. The words felt weightless now. And Karen, she finally understood what it felt like to be ignored. After the deputies left with flash drives, statements, and Karen trailing behind them in a flurry of denial, we stood at the gate in silence. I turned to my husband. "You planned all of that?" He looked at me like it wasn't even a question. Never start a battle until you've already won it on paper. That night, the neighborhood was quiet, no flyers, no warnings, no trucks, just one last message sent to every resident on our gravel road. It was from Karen, short, desperate. "I've stepped down from my HOA role. There will be no further enforcement actions. Please respect community standards. No apology, no accountability, just surrender." And even that was too late, because Karen still didn't know the best part. The real play hadn't landed yet. But it was coming, and when it did, she wouldn't just lose her fake HOA, she'd lose everything. By the next morning, the neighborhood was different, quieter, calmer. But not because things had settled. No, it was the calm before something bigger. Karen had officially stepped down, sure. But the mess she made was still leaking all over our road. Around 9 a.m., Naomi stopped by. She was holding a flyer folded, fresh, still warm from a home printer. "You guys see this?" she asked. I opened it up, typed in bold, all caps, "Do not be fooled by military intimidation tactics. This neighborhood deserves leadership, not threats." No name, no signature, but we didn't need one. It reeked of Karen, and just beneath the headline, a photo, blurry, grainy, but clearly a screenshot from our drone footage, showing my husband standing at the fence line, arms crossed, watching her crew get questioned. She'd printed propaganda. That was her comeback plan. Try to make a Navy SEAL look like a thug. It was laughable. Until we saw the second line. "We will be petitioning to reinstate structure and restore order." She still didn't get it. She thought this was a game, but my husband had already moved into checkmate. He spent the day building a formal report, one that didn't just outline Karen's behavior but connected the dots, her flyers, her self-appointed board, her Craigslist goons. He listed every resident who'd received a fake fine, every one of the compliance officers caught on camera, every piece of documentation she forged and distributed. But the real kicker, he traced the bank trail. Using public payment processors and voluntary neighbor contributions, we followed over $3,800 in fines and fees, all routed to an account tied to Karen's maiden name. It was set up through a fake enforcement division business, registered under a P.O. box 2 towns over. And guess who was listed as the agent? Patricia Crowley, Karen's older sister. Same Karen energy, but with librarian glasses and a quieter tone. She'd stayed behind the scenes the whole time, but she was in it all the way. That night, my husband made 2 moves. 1. He submitted the full report to the county fraud division. 2. He had Naomi help him print 15 bound copies, one for every household on the road. He called it the Oak Hill Deception, how one woman tried to steal a neighborhood. And on the first page, a photo of Karen in her tactical vest, clipboard in hand, standing behind a man with a fake badge. It wasn't petty, it was evidence, and it changed everything. By noon the next day, every porch had a copy. No note, no threats, just truth, and it spread fast. Phones buzzed. Screenshots flew within hours. Neighbors were showing up at our driveway one by one. Bill, the retired deputy, said, This is how you dismantle corruption." Naomi handed my husband a tray of cookies and said, "That's from everyone. And yeah, we're all in for what comes next." "What comes next?" I asked. He looked at me with that calm stare and replied, "Cleanup." Karen went silent for 2 days. No texts, no flyers, no visits. Until Friday afternoon. We were coming back from the hardware store when we saw it. A folding table on her front lawn, stacked with printouts and manila envelopes. A sign read, "Truth about the Navy SEAL and his wife community briefing materials." My husband didn't stop the truck. He just shook his head. "She's really gonna go for it," he said. "She's going to crash her own name into the pavement." That evening, 5 neighbors walked across the street and grabbed a packet. 2 hours later, all 5 were on our porch, holding the same packet, faces tight with disbelief. Inside were printed screenshots, taken wildly out of context, photo stills of my husband walking the perimeter, me on the phone, a drone shot labeled surveillance operation, and the kicker, a paragraph claiming my husband misused his military training to intimidate local governance in a non-violent but psychologically manipulative way. One guy said, "She really tried to use military service as a weapon against you. She's finished," Naomi added. "Even the people who tried to stay neutral are backing off." My husband simply said, "It's time." He sent one final email to the state attorney general's office. Attached was the full case file, bank trail, video evidence, and her most recent attempt to smear a federal veteran. He didn't send it as a complaint. He sent it as a petition for legal review under fraudulent HOA activity, wire fraud, and land misuse impersonation. In the subject line, he wrote, "Attempted property seizure under falsified authority urgent review requested." Then he closed the laptop and went outside, and for the first time in weeks, he just sat on the porch swing, not watching, not waiting, just breathing. Because now the timeline wasn't in our hands, it was in the states. The response came 2 days later, not an arrest, not yet. But something better, a letter, stamped and official, from the Office of HOA Oversight and Compliance Investigation. They were launching an inquiry and requesting a full interview with my husband, Naomi, and at least 3 other impacted residents. The letter ended with, "Due to the nature of the alleged impersonation and fraud, criminal liability may be pursued at the state level. Please retain all documents and footage." And just like that, Karen's clipboard days were numbered. That night my husband made one final move. He walked across the road, no clipboard, no anger, just his phone and a letter. Karen saw him coming from behind the blinds. She opened the door like she was still in charge. He didn't even speak right away. Just handed her the letter. She opened it, scanned it. And for the first time since she moved in, she didn't say a word, just stood there, frozen, until my husband said, "You try to play soldier, you try to play sheriff, but the difference is when I make a move, it's real." She looked up. "I didn't mean for this to get so big." He nodded. "You didn't think anyone would push back, but you picked the wrong people." Then he walked away, and Karen she didn't follow, because deep down she knew she was about to lose more than her clipboard. The next 2 weeks were quiet, too quiet. No flyers, no fake patrols. No HOA memos printed in bold red ink. Karen's front lawn sat empty, the clipboard table, gone, her SUV, barely moved. For the first time since she moved in, Karen was still, but we weren't. The state HOA investigation unit set up interviews that Monday. My husband went first. He wore jeans, boots, and a black polo. Same one from the day she tried to reassign our lot. The irony didn't go unnoticed. The investigator, a woman named Sims, had a calm, clinical voice. No small talk, just questions. Did she ever use official government branding in her flyers? No. Did she impersonate law enforcement or falsely imply legal jurisdiction? Yes, multiple times. We have video. Did she attempt to collect fees? She collected over $3,800 under a fake name linked to her sister. Sims didn't flinch. She just wrote and wrote and wrote. Naomi's interview came next. She brought screenshots, fake fine notices, and a binder labeled Karen's Chaos. Her testimony hit harder than anyone expected. She told me if I didn't pay the lighting violation fee, she'd report me to county code enforcement. I believed her. I paid her. Twice, Bill, the retired deputy, followed. He spoke slowly, firmly. "Fake badge, fake vest, tried to enter my property. If I hadn't recognized the cheap patch, I might have assumed he was real." The state agent asked, "Do you believe she was acting alone?" Bill didn't even hesitate. "No. I believe she was running it, but I think her sister and her officers were paid to play along." That's when the energy in the room shifted, because this wasn't just about HOA drama anymore. It was about organized deception. 4 days later, it happened. 2 unmarked state vehicles rolled up to Karen's house just after 8 a.m. No sirens, no shouting, just procedure. We watched from our porch, mugs in hand, as the officers stepped out. One knocked. The other waited with a manila envelope. Karen opened the door, still in a robe, still pretending she had control. The officer handed her the envelope and said something we couldn't hear. She looked at the papers, then looked up at them, then looked across the street, right at us. Her face wasn't angry, it wasn't smug, it was lost. For the first time, Karen looked like someone who realized the curtain had dropped, and she was still standing on stage. She didn't get arrested. Not yet, but she was served a formal civil complaint and notice of investigation under the following: fraudulent misrepresentation of a governing authority, collection of unauthorized fines, impersonation through false uniforms, use of false documentation to intimidate residents, attempted illegal modification of county-recorded property lines, all of it spelled out in a 12-page packet delivered to her door. She tried to act unfazed, tried to hand it back, but the officer stepped away, hands up. "It's yours now, ma'am." Then they left, and Karen, she closed her door without another word. We thought that might be the end, but it wasn't. Because Patricia, her clipboard-slinging sister, thought she could slide under the radar. Turns out her name was on the payment accounts. She was listed as operations manager for Oak Hill compliance on a dozen Venmo receipts. So the state sent her a letter too. And this time, it came with a subpoena. Patricia showed up at the next community meeting, hair perfect, smile fake, voice trembling. "I want to clarify some of the confusion. I was only helping with organization. Karen asked me to assist with payment tracking, not enforcement." But the neighbors weren't buying it. One guy stood up. "You cashed my check." Another woman added, "You threatened my husband over a mailbox color." Then Bill said it loud and clear. "You don't get to call it helping when you're holding the pen that's writing the lies." Patricia left early, and she didn't come back. The fallout wasn't a nuclear explosion. It was a slow collapse. The HOA that wasn't officially got flagged on the state registry as a fraudulent entity pending legal action. Karen's P.O. box license was revoked. The Oak Hill compliance account got frozen. And then, the final nail, a countywide bulletin sent to every property owner that read, "Any documents received from Oak Hill compliance enforcement are null and void. If you have paid money, you may qualify for reimbursement pending investigation outcome." The bulletin ended with a line my husband had to read twice. "We thank the residents who reported this activity. Your vigilance protected not only your land but your neighbors as well." We framed it. The bulletin, hung it next to the GoPro photo, the one of Karen's enforcement team walking off our property with their heads down, and beside that, my husband's Navy SEAL trident patch, not to brag, not to threaten, but as a reminder that sometimes the best defense is knowing exactly how to take control when others abuse it. A few weeks later, Karen sold her house. No farewell message, no apology, just a moving van, a closed curtain, and a rumor that she was starting over somewhere quiet. Somewhere that wouldn't ask questions. She didn't wave goodbye, but we stood on the porch anyway, just to see her leave. The neighborhood changed after that, not overnight, but slowly. People started talking again, helping again, smiling again. Naomi put up a swing in her yard. Bill offered to repaint the faded stop sign at the end of the road, and Eduardo, he finally rebuilt the corner of his fence that Karen had tried to claim. Every day it looked more and more like a neighborhood, not a battlefield, not a dictatorship, just home. The best part, no one had to raise a voice or throw a punch. All it took was one man willing to push back, quietly, legally, strategically, and a community that remembered what it felt like to stand together. A few weeks later, my husband got a letter from the state investigator. It was brief, but it said everything that mattered. Case closed. Enforcement terminated. Subject flagged for future action if activity resumes. Thank you for your cooperation and for your calm professionalism. Some people try to wear badges they didn't earn. You earned yours, and it shows. I asked my husband how he felt reading that. He just shrugged. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because people like Karen don't stop unless someone knows how to stop them." And that's what stuck with me, because Karen didn't just pick the wrong neighbor, she picked the wrong wife. And she had no idea that the man sipping coffee across from her clipboard fantasy was trained to diffuse worse, trained to lead men through combat zones, trained to read lies before they're spoken, trained to win wars without ever firing a shot. She thought she could take our land. She thought she could fake authority. She thought fear would keep us silent. But fear only works when you knock on the wrong door and no one answers. This time, the door opened, and the Navy SEAL answered.